At 2:13 in the morning, I woke up because the mountain sounded wrong. Not thunder, not wind, water. A deep, continuous roar came from the slope behind my house. The kind of sound you feel through the floor before you understand what you are hearing. I pulled on boots, grabbed a rain jacket, and walked onto the back porch. The rain was coming sideways, and my flashlight barely reached the tree line, but I could see the drainage channel above my pasture already running hard. Brown water poured between exposed rocks, carrying branches and leaves downhill toward the eastern edge of my property. That was exactly what the channel was supposed to do. For decades, runoff from the ridge had followed that route. Down the slope, through my land, into a deeper natural swale along the property boundary, then under the lower access road through an old culvert, before entering the larger county drainage system. My father used to call it the mountain spillway. 3 weeks earlier, Cedar Summit Estates HOA had filled almost 180 feet of it. They called the ditch ugly. I called it necessary. I had warned them in writing, and my civil engineer had warned them too. The HOA president, Melissa Grant, had received a report stating that the channel carried runoff from approximately 140 acres uphill and should be restored before a major storm. She did not restore it. Instead, her landscaping contractor compacted more soil over the fill and laid fresh sod on top. Now the remnants of a tropical system were dumping inches of rain onto the ridge, and the mountain had reached the place where its escape route used to be. At first, the water spread across the new grass. Then it backed up. Within minutes, it began moving sideways along the HOA fence. I knew exactly where it would go next. Brookstone Lane, the lowest street in Cedar Summit. I called the county emergency line and reported a drainage obstruction with active flooding. Then I called the HOA emergency number. Nobody answered. At 2:41, one of my cameras caught the first surge crossing the boundary. At 2:56, a homeowner on Brookstone Lane called me. His garage was taking water. At 3:12, another resident sent a video showing water over the curb. At 3:40, headlights moved through what looked like a shallow river where the street had been. By daylight, sections of Brookstone Lane were under close to 3 feet of muddy water. 5 garages had flooded, 11 driveways were submerged, and the lower clubhouse parking area looked like a pond. Mulch, trash cans, branches, and pieces of decorative landscaping floated against parked vehicles. One retaining wall had partially failed, and the brand-new sod the HOA installed over the old drainage channel was gone. Melissa arrived shortly after sunrise. She stood beside the flooded street wearing rubber boots and told residents the storm had been unprecedented. Maybe the storm was unusual, but I had an email on my phone sent 23 days earlier. Subject, urgent. Restore natural drainage before major storm event. Attached to it was a stamped engineering memorandum. The last paragraph said, "The recently placed fill materially reduces the conveyance capacity of the existing natural drainage course. Removal and restoration are recommended before a significant rainfall event." Melissa had replied, "We believe the landscaping improvements provide adequate surface drainage. No further action is planned at this time." I saved that message in 3 places. By 9 o'clock that morning, county stormwater inspectors were walking the flooded area. By noon, my engineer was tracing high water marks. That afternoon, the HOA's own contractor produced an email that changed everything. Before filling the channel, his project manager had asked Melissa, "Has stormwater approval been obtained for work within this drainage feature?" Her response was 6 words. "This is landscaping. Proceed as planned." It was no longer my word against hers. The HOA had been warned before the work, warned after the work, warned by an engineer. Then the storm arrived, and for the first time, everybody in Cedar Summit could see exactly where the water went when a board decided a mountain drainage channel was just an ugly ditch. My name is Ryan Mercer. I was 51 when Cedar Summit filled the drainage channel. I own 18 acres outside Hendersonville, North Carolina, on the lower shoulder of a wooded ridge. The land is not dramatic from the road. A modest house, a detached workshop, a few acres of pasture, and the rest climbing into hardwood forest. But the property changes fast once rain starts. Everything uphill matters. Water coming off a mountain does not care where your deed line sits. It follows grade. That was something my father taught me, long before I understood runoff calculations. He bought the property in 1986. Back then, Cedar Summit did not exist, and the land below us belonged to a family that kept cattle. During dry weather, the eastern drainage swale looked almost pointless. A shallow depression, rock, ferns, grass, a little erosion. After heavy rain, it became a moving channel. Dad never built in it, never stacked firewood in it, never tried to make it pretty. Every few years he removed fallen branches so the flow stayed open. When I inherited the property, I did the same. I work in commercial HVAC project management. I am not a hydrologist, and I do not pretend to be one. But decades of watching that hillside taught me enough to respect water. Then Cedar Summit Estates was built below us. The subdivision went in about 12 years before the flood. 86 homes, a clubhouse, pool, walking paths, and decorative stone walls. The lowest row of houses sat along Brookstone Lane. During development, engineers installed storm drains along the road and a detention system farther downhill. The original plans also recognized the natural channel coming off my side of the ridge. That detail mattered later. For most of Cedar Summit's early years, nobody touched it. The developer kept a buffer along the boundary. Maintenance crews trimmed only the HOA side, and water continued down the same route it had followed for generations. Then control transferred fully to homeowners, and Melissa Grant became HOA president 3 years later. Melissa was good at making Cedar Summit look expensive. She pushed for uniform mailbox posts, replaced faded trail signs, added ornamental grasses around the clubhouse, and had utility boxes screened with shrubs. Most residents liked the improvements. Then she turned her attention to the western boundary. From the HOA walking trail, you could see part of my drainage swale through the fence. It was not beautiful in the conventional sense. The bottom stayed damp, storms exposed stone, leaves collected, and in summer, jewelweed and ferns grew higher than the manicured grass beside the trail. Melissa called it neglected. The first email was framed as a courtesy. She asked whether I could clean up the drainage depression because residents had complained about weeds and standing water. I removed 2 fallen limbs. That was it. There was no permanent standing water, and there were no abandoned materials. I told her the vegetation helped stabilize the banks, and that I was not going to grade the channel without professional advice. Several weeks later, the HOA sent a formal letter. It referred to the channel as a landscape depression adjoining community property. The board requested that I fill low areas, establish uniform grade, and install turf, or approved ground cover. I read it twice, then I checked the HOA boundary. My parcel was not part of Cedar Summit, and the board had no landscaping jurisdiction over my property. I wrote back politely, "The drainage feature lies on or adjacent to my private parcel and conveys stormwater from the mountain watershed. I will not fill or regrade it without county and engineering review." That should have ended the matter, but it did not. Melissa began arguing that the ditch created erosion and mosquito risk near HOA common property. I asked for the environmental or county inspection supporting that claim. None existed. Then Cedar Summit hired a landscape designer to improve what it called the Western Greenway. The concept included a continuous grass berm beside the walking trail. The problem was obvious. The berm crossed the downstream section of the natural drainage route. I emailed the property manager, then sent a certified letter. Do not place fill in the drainage channel. Do not alter grade across my property. Confirm boundary before construction. A week later, the management company replied that all planned work would remain on association-controlled land. I wanted to believe them, so I did what a lot of ordinary homeowners do. I went back to work. If you own land uphill or downhill from a subdivision, one lesson is worth remembering. Drainage features do not have to look engineered to be important. An ugly swale can be doing more work during a storm than an expensive landscaped basin does on a sunny day. If you have ever watched an HOA, neighbor, or contractor alter drainage because they wanted a cleaner-looking yard, leave your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who lives on a slope or near a natural channel, because water disputes often begin when somebody changes grade without understanding where the runoff came from. I did not want Cedar Summit flooded. Those people were my neighbors. I only wanted the board to leave a functioning drainage route alone. Instead, they decided grass looked better than rock. The work happened while I was in Charlotte for 2 nights. My driveway camera caught the first dump truck at 8:07 on Wednesday morning. It did not enter my driveway. It went through Cedar Summit's maintenance access. By noon, there were 4 trucks, and the camera farther down my pasture showed machinery working near the fence. I saw the alerts but assumed they were landscaping their side. When I came home Friday afternoon, the natural channel looked completely different. The lower section had been filled, not lightly dressed. Filled. The depression that had once been 2 to 4 feet deep in places had been packed with soil and crushed material. The contractor had shaped a smooth berm, topsoil covered it, and sections already had sod. I walked the line and felt sick. The fill extended across the drainage route for roughly 180 feet. Part of the work sat on HOA common property. Part appeared to cross onto mine. But property line aside, the hydraulic problem was obvious. The natural low path was gone. I called the property manager. He told me the Western Greenway improvements had been completed, according to the board-approved plan. I asked whether anyone had obtained stormwater approval. He did not know. I asked whether a civil engineer designed the fill. He said a landscape consultant prepared the grading concept. Those are not the same thing. Then Melissa called me. She said the project corrected an erosion problem and improved community appearance. I reminded her that I had warned the board in writing. She told me the work was on HOA property. I said water does not care who owns the berm. Then she made the comment that stayed with me. Ryan, it was a ditch. We landscaped it. The next morning, I started documenting. Photographs from every angle, tape measurements, old photos showing previous depth, camera timestamps, and copies of every warning I had sent. Then, I called County Stormwater. The person I spoke with did not declare an emergency over the phone. He asked for location, photographs, and any old drainage plans. I submitted everything. Next, I hired civil engineer Mark Delaney. Mark specialized in stormwater and site design. I did not tell him what conclusion I wanted. I told him what changed. He walked the upper slope first, then the channel, then the HOA side. He used topographic data and county mapping to estimate the contributing watershed. When he gave me the preliminary number, I thought I misunderstood him. Approximately 140 acres. My 18 acres were only part of it. Runoff from higher parcels and wooded ridge areas converged toward the same natural route. During ordinary rain, the channel handled water quietly. During a large storm, the volume could increase dramatically. Mark explained something simple. The HOA had not eliminated drainage, it had eliminated one path. The water would find another. The question was which one. He pulled elevation data. The most likely overflow route ran east along the filled section, then dropped toward Cedar Summit, straight toward Brookstone Lane. That was when I stopped treating this like a property line disagreement. I asked Mark for a written memorandum as quickly as he could prepare one. Meanwhile, county staff located Cedar Summit's original subdivision drainage plans. One sheet contained a note beside the western boundary. Existing natural drainage course. Maintain unobstructed conveyance. Another design calculation, Assumed off-site runoff continued through the existing swale before entering downstream drainage. That was critical. The subdivision's stormwater system had been designed with the old route in mind, and Melissa's landscaping project had changed one of the assumptions behind that design. I sent the county sheet to the HOA that same day. 2 days later, Mark completed his memorandum. He did not predict that houses would definitely flood. Engineers are careful for a reason. He wrote that the fill materially reduced conveyance capacity, increased the likelihood of upstream ponding and lateral diversion, and should be removed or evaluated through a formal drainage design before a significant rainfall event. Rachel Bennett, the attorney I hired after the fill crossed the boundary, sent the memorandum by email and certified mail to Melissa, the property manager, the HOA attorney, and the landscape contractor. The contractor responded first. His project manager, Jason Burke, asked for a copy of the old drainage plan. We sent it, then silence. Melissa responded the following morning, stating that the HOA's landscape consultant believed the improved surface grading would disperse runoff safely across the greenway. Mark read her email and called me. Dispersion might work for ordinary sheet flow, but it was not a substitute for a channel receiving concentrated mountain runoff. Rachel sent one final notice: restore the drainage route or obtain a qualified engineered solution before severe weather. No one moved the dirt. Instead, crews finished laying sod. 2 weeks later, a tropical system began moving inland, and the forecast increased every day. Mark emailed the HOA again. Significant rainfall possible. Temporary reopening of the channel should be considered immediately. Jason, the contractor, forwarded the message to Melissa. She answered that the site was complete, and disturbing the new grading before clear evidence of failure would be premature. I read that email on a Sunday evening. The storm arrived Tuesday night. Once the rain stopped, I did not go down to Brookstone Lane looking for an argument. Residents had enough problems. People were pushing water out of garages. Insurance adjusters were arriving. Tow trucks were moving damaged vehicles. And firefighters had already helped several older residents get through the deepest section of water during the night. I stayed with Mark and county staff near the drainage corridor. Evidence disappears quickly after a flood. Debris lines flatten, mud gets cleaned, equipment arrives. So Mark photographed everything before restoration began. The pattern was clear. Water came down the historic channel, reached the compacted fill, backed up, spread laterally, and then followed the lowest available grade toward Cedar Summit. Vegetation along the fence was flattened in one direction. Mud lines marked the temporary ponding area, and a section of new sod had peeled back like carpet. The former ditch would have carried part of that flow downhill. Now that volume had crossed the greenway and entered the subdivision. No responsible engineer said the fill created the storm. It did not. No one claimed Brookstone Lane would have remained perfectly dry under every possible scenario. The storm was real and substantial. The technical question was whether obstructing the channel materially worsened or redirected runoff. Mark believed it did, and county inspectors appeared to agree that the work required correction. Then we learned the landscaping contractor had protected himself better than Melissa realized. Jason Burke gave his insurer the project file. That file contained an email from before construction, where Jason had noticed the depression on site and asked, "Has drainage approval been obtained for this channel? Existing feature appears to receive off-site runoff." Melissa answered, "This is landscaping, not stormwater work. Proceed as planned." The landscape consultant had been copied. He later clarified that his drawings addressed appearance and finish grading, not hydrologic capacity. That distinction was devastating for the HOA. The board had been treating landscape design like drainage engineering. Then came Rachel's preservation requests for every email, board minute, work order, contract, photograph, maintenance report, insurance communication, and stormwater document. The HOA's attorney immediately instructed the board not to delete anything. We obtained the board minutes from the month before construction. One member named Robert Ellis had asked whether the natural depression should be evaluated before filling. Melissa said the contractor would maintain positive drainage. Robert asked whether positive drainage meant preserving the existing ditch, and the minutes said the matter was referred to the project team. No engineering review followed. Then we found the budget. The original Greenway estimate included $8,500 for drainage evaluation and possible stone line channel improvements. That line was removed during cost reduction. Instead, the final project used fill and sod. The savings looked small compared with what happened afterward. Insurance claims began stacking up. Garage drywall, stored tools, water heaters, flooring in lower-level utility areas, vehicle damage, landscape restoration, retaining wall repairs, and common area cleanup. The HOA's master carrier sent its own engineer, and several homeowners' carriers sent others. Everyone took measurements, and nobody accepted Melissa's first explanation that the flooding was purely an act of nature without looking at the altered channel. Rachel told me not to make public accusations, and that advice was valuable. I did not post online that Melissa flooded the neighborhood. I did not tell homeowners the HOA owed them specific amounts, and I did not pretend Mark's memorandum was a court judgment. I simply gave investigators the documents, which kept the case clean. Then County Code Enforcement issued a formal notice. The fill had altered an established drainage feature without the level of review required for the work performed. The county ordered Cedar Summit to submit a corrective drainage plan, and until approved, no additional grading could occur except emergency stabilization authorized by the inspector. The HOA now had to hire the kind of engineer it should have hired before the project. That engineer, Caroline Shaw, worked for a firm with no connection to me. Her conclusion was painful for the board. The natural channel needed to be reopened. Not necessarily exactly as it had looked before, but its conveyance had to be restored. Bank stabilization, proper grade, erosion protection, culvert coordination, and vegetation suited to the corridor. The beautiful continuous grass berm was finished. Then Caroline modeled the storm using available rainfall data and site topography. Her report did not say the HOA caused every inch of flooding, but it said the obstruction increased upstream water elevation and redirected a significant portion of runoff toward the subdivision's low point. That was enough. Now 2 independent engineers and county staff were pointing in the same direction. And Rachel still had Melissa's written response refusing restoration before the storm. The HOA's insurer asked for the entire communication timeline, and once they read it, settlement discussions began almost immediately. The first formal meeting after the flood took place at Cedar Summit's clubhouse. It was not a public board meeting. Around the table were Melissa, the property manager, 2 board members, the HOA attorney, the master insurance adjuster, Jason Burke, and his contractor counsel, Caroline Shaw, Rachel, Mark, and me. Nobody cared what the ditch looked like anymore. Caroline started with the survey and topography, showing the natural drainage route before construction, the filled condition, and the observed flood path. The maps were simple enough that nobody needed an engineering degree. Blue arrows came down the mountain, reached the filled section, and turned toward Brookstone Lane. Melissa asked whether anyone could prove the street would not have flooded without the landscaping project. Caroline said that was not the engineering question she had been asked. The issue was whether the obstruction increased or redirected flow, and her analysis said yes. Mark agreed. Then the HOA attorney asked about rainfall intensity. The storm was substantial, possibly beyond some ordinary design assumptions, but again, that did not erase the obstruction. A large storm is exactly when drainage capacity matters most. Then Jason's attorney placed his pre-construction email on the screen. Has drainage approval been obtained for this channel? Melissa's response appeared beneath it. This is landscaping, not stormwater work. Proceed as planned. The room went silent. Jason explained that his company had been hired for landscape construction. They did not perform hydrologic design. The plan showed fill. He raised the drainage question, and the client told him to proceed. Rachel then placed our warning timeline beside it. My original certified letter before work, my email after the fill, the county drainage plan, Mark's engineering memorandum, Rachel's demand, Mark's severe weather warning, and Melissa's response. One by one, the arguments narrowed. The board had notice before construction that the area was a drainage feature, notice after construction that the fill could redirect runoff, a professional recommendation to restore it, a major storm forecast, and still no corrective work. Melissa said she had relied on the landscape consultant. The consultant's written scope said grading aesthetics and landscape integration, not stormwater engineering. That defense weakened too. Then the insurer asked the property manager whether the full engineering memorandum had been circulated to the board, and he confirmed every director received it. Robert Ellis looked at Melissa and said he had emailed asking for an emergency meeting after receiving Mark's report. That email had not been included in the first set of documents, but the property manager found it later. Robert had written, "Given the potential downstream risk, I recommend we authorize temporary reopening before the forecasted storm." Melissa replied that reopening the completed project without board consensus could violate the contractor warranty and create unnecessary expense. No emergency meeting occurred. That was the real turning point. Before that, Melissa could say she misunderstood the drainage feature. After that email, the board president had been presented with a specific risk and a temporary correction, but she chose appearance, cost, and project completion over reopening the channel. The insurance adjuster stopped asking technical questions and started asking about limits, deductibles, and claims handling. Rachel made my position clear. I was not seeking payment for every flooded garage, as those homeowners had their own claims. My property damage was relatively limited. Some erosion, fence damage, loss of vegetation, survey and engineering expense, and attorney fees. My main demand was restoration of the drainage path and written confirmation that Cedar Summit would not alter it again without proper review. The HOA attorney asked whether I would allow the association to install a landscaped closed pipe instead of an open channel. Mark said maybe, if properly engineered, and I said I was not opposed to an engineered solution simply because I preferred a ditch. That surprised Melissa. She seemed to expect revenge. I did not care whether water moved through stone, vegetation, or properly sized infrastructure. I cared that it had somewhere to go. Caroline evaluated the pipe option, noting it required more capacity, inlet structures, maintenance access, and downstream work than the HOA expected. Open channel restoration was cheaper and more resilient, so the ditch came back. Only this time, everybody stopped calling it a ditch. The official drawings labeled it Natural Stormwater Conveyance Channel. Same water, more expensive name. Restoration began 6 weeks after the flood. County inspectors approved the plan first, which was important because no one wanted a second improvised solution. Excavators removed the compacted fill, and crews worked carefully near the property boundary. Grant Hollis, the surveyor Rachel hired, marked the line so the project did not become another dispute. The original low route reappeared gradually. Then crews reshaped the banks, installed stone at high-velocity sections, added erosion control fabric, replaced the damaged connection near the lower culvert, and planted native grasses and moisture-tolerant vegetation. The final channel did not look exactly like the old one. It looked better, not manicured but functional. County stormwater staff inspected each stage, and the HOA had to maintain access for future inspections and keep the conveyance free of fill, walls, landscaping berms, or storage. A small marker went up near the trail. Natural stormwater channel. Keep clear. I took a photograph. For months, Melissa had called it an eyesore. Now the HOA had an official sign explaining why it had to remain. The insurance side moved more slowly. Some homeowners recovered through their own carriers first, and subrogation questions followed. The HOA's master insurer negotiated claims related to common areas and alleged negligence. I was not part of every settlement and never pretended to know every dollar. But what residents did learn was enough. The association paid its deductible. Legal expenses rose, engineering costs were substantial, and drainage reconstruction cost far more than preserving the original feature would have. The clubhouse parking area needed repair, the damaged retaining wall had to be rebuilt, and several homeowners pursued reimbursement for losses not fully covered elsewhere. Jason's landscaping company participated in restoration work, but disputed being solely responsible. His email asking about stormwater approval protected him from being treated as the only bad actor. The landscape consultant's insurer became involved too. Everyone had lawyers, everyone had contracts, and everyone suddenly cared about scope. Then Cedar Summit held a public meeting, and Brookstone Lane residents filled the clubhouse. Melissa began by saying the storm had been extraordinary and that the board was cooperating fully with county requirements. A homeowner named Gary Mills raised his hand. His garage had taken 19 inches of water. He asked whether the board had received an engineering warning before the storm. Melissa said the documents were still being reviewed. Robert Ellis interrupted. Yes, the board had received it. The room changed instantly. Another resident asked whether reopening the channel had been recommended before the rain, and Robert said yes. Then the property manager confirmed the email timeline. Melissa said professionals had given conflicting advice, and residents asked who. The landscape consultant had addressed grading. Mark had addressed drainage. Those were not equivalent opinions. Then Gary asked the question that ended Melissa's control of the meeting. If an engineer says water from 140 acres is headed toward a blocked ditch, why are we debating grass? Nobody applauded. They did not need to. The silence was worse. The board voted to remove Melissa's authority to approve contractor work without full board review. A separate policy required engineering review for grading, drainage alterations, retaining structures, culverts, and projects near natural water conveyances. Another required any capital project near an external boundary to include a survey. Then residents began collecting signatures for a recall, and Melissa resigned before the vote took place. Robert served as interim president. His first interaction with me was almost comically simple. He walked the restored channel with Caroline and asked one question. What do we need to do to keep this functioning? Caroline gave him a maintenance schedule. Debris checks after major storms, vegetation control without stripping roots, no fill, no storage, inspect the culvert. That was it. No drama, no design committee, no argument about visual harmony. Water management became boring again, and that was exactly what I wanted. 4 months after restoration, another heavy rain hit the ridge, not as severe as the storm that flooded Brookstone Lane, but strong enough that I went outside to watch. The channel filled quickly, and water moved down from the trees, through the rocky upper section, into the restored swale, past the stone protection, and under the lower culvert, exactly where it was supposed to go. I drove down to Cedar Summit later that afternoon. Brookstone Lane was wet, gutters were running, and storm drains were busy. But there was no brown river across the pavement, no water in garages, and no trash cans floating against vehicles. The restored channel had done its job. That moment mattered more to me than Melissa resigning, because I had never wanted proof in the form of flooded homes. I wanted the warning to be enough, and it should have been. The strangest part was how Cedar Summit eventually embraced the channel. The new board did not try to hide it. They removed part of the decorative fence so maintenance crews could inspect the bank. Native plants grew along the edge, and a trail sign explained that the feature conveyed stormwater from the mountain watershed. Some residents began calling it the creek, even though it was dry much of the year, and children stopped beside it after rain to watch the flow. The thing the old board had considered ugly became part of the landscape once people understood what it did. My settlement with Cedar Summit covered documented survey, engineering, legal, erosion, and restoration-related expenses associated with my property. The association acknowledged that future work affecting the channel required proper review and could not be imposed on my parcel through HOA landscaping standards. That was enough for me. I did not become a drainage activist. I did not join the HOA, and I did not attend every meeting to remind people I had been right. I went back to my normal life: work, pasture, workshop, occasional maintenance along the channel. After storms, Robert sometimes texted asking whether everything looked clear uphill. That was the entire relationship. Neighbors sharing information before water became a problem. If this story made you think about drainage ditches, mountain runoff, HOA landscaping, grading, or stormwater, share it with someone who owns a home on a slope or near a natural swale. Save the video if you ever face a dispute over drainage, because photographs, old site plans, certified letters, engineer reports, contractor emails, survey records, and camera footage can become extremely important once the weather changes. And tell me in the comments what you would have done after receiving the first HOA demand to fill the ditch. Would you have hired an engineer immediately, or would you have assumed the board would back off after seeing the warning? I am curious how many people have seen a landscaping project create a drainage problem that nobody anticipated. If you enjoy property rights stories where ordinary homeowners respond with evidence, engineers, county records, attorneys, and lawful process instead of reckless revenge, subscribe and share the video. Sometimes the difference between a small neighborhood argument and an enormous insurance claim is simply whether someone listens before the rain starts. I still keep Melissa's email, not because I enjoy reading it, because 6 words can explain an entire disaster. This is landscaping. Proceed as planned. That was the mistake. They thought they were changing appearance. They were changing grade. They thought they were covering an ugly depression. They were blocking concentrated runoff. They thought sod made the problem disappear, but the water disagreed. The mountain had been sending rain through that channel long before Cedar Summit built its first house. My father understood that without computer models, and the subdivision engineers understood it well enough to write, "Maintain unobstructed conveyance." Mark proved it with watershed calculations. I warned them. Rachel warned them, the contractor asked. And then the forecast warned them one more time. Nobody needed hindsight. The warning existed before the flood, and that became the difference between an unfortunate storm and an expensive accountability problem. Cedar Summit could not control how much rain fell that night, and neither could I. What the HOA controlled was whether the water still had the route everyone knew it used. They changed that route, and when the storm arrived, gravity finished the argument. The board had a landscaping plan. I had the old drainage drawings. They had fresh sod. I had a civil engineer. They had a beautiful green berm, but the mountain had approximately 140 acres of runoff behind it. For a few weeks, the berm looked better than the ditch. Then one night of rain erased the grass, flooded the street, and exposed the reason the channel had been there in the first place. The HOA eventually spent far more restoring it than they ever would have spent leaving it alone, and the little sign beside the trail now says everything I tried to tell them from the beginning: keep clear. Not because the ditch is beautiful, but because water needs somewhere to go.